This is Still Enrolled.
And welcome on into the latest edition of Still Enrolled, a Big Ten football podcast. As always, Ryan Hickey, Brian Tripp with you here after Week 10 in college football. Tripp, there was so much to talk about here after a big Week 10. Obviously, the matchup we're going to dive into first here, Ohio State taking down Penn State, but some big results around the conference as well. Some big results around college football as we get set for the biggest poll. That's right, the college football playoff poll to be revealed for the first time this season on Tuesday. So much to get into, Tripp. A story from hell surrounding Penn State, Ohio State that I will get into a little bit later on as well. But Tripp, man, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, and I can't wait. I think the cool thing, some may not view it as cool as I do, but what's great for us this week on this podcast is there are games with meaningful results. 7 AP top 25 teams lost on Saturday. Outside of the Big Ten, you obviously had Penn State falling in the Big Ten and Illinois. But what's unique about all of these games, I think there's obviously the game breakdown that we can do, but there's so many big picture storylines, like not just the micro when you dive into it, but the macro viewpoint you can have on a lot of these games and what takes shape now as we are in November. And I have to give a shout out last week, Joshua Perry, Jason Kabinda, and our audiences, Matt Fortuna last week as well. 3 great guests last week. And our audience last week was going up. So continue to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends. Last week was a home run on the podcast. So I can't wait to see where we go this week and where our audience continues to grow this week, whether it's on YouTube and our subscriptions were up, our views were up, or wherever you get your podcasts from, Spotify, Apple. Obviously, our partnership with Odyssey has been tremendous so far. So I can't wait to see where the podcast goes this week. And obviously a great Monday to kick it all off, talking about so many great games, big games in the Big Ten.
To piggyback what you said, Tripp, right? For those listening and watching, you do your part. We'll try at least to continue our part here of giving you some good content twice a week, every single week here, discussing and breaking down some good Big Ten football and some big time games. Speaking of micro and macro, micro for Penn State, Ohio State. Ohio State gets a massive win here. Everything that they were hoping for in the beginning of the season, win the Big Ten, make college football playoffs, but win a national title, back on after they do take down Penn State here 20-13 in Happy Valley. Let's look at it from the victory side first here, Tripp. What impressed you the most with Ohio State going into a hostile environment at noon and coming out victorious?
I think their ability to win a physical game. Sure, Jeremiah Smith had a couple of big plays. Emeka Egbuka had a couple of big plays. But all the questions, and our key matchup going into this game was Ohio State's offensive line, beleaguered, beat-up offensive line against Penn State's defensive line. And it wasn't so much the passing game for Ohio State. And obviously, that usually gets all of the focus. But what they did with Donovan Jackson at left tackle, and he had a great quote after the game about what they needed to do to win. And then going back to a guy, Carson Hinsman, at left guard, and a guy who has experience starting there. And the pieces of the puzzle that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly put together, what they were able to do and out-physical Penn State. The 176 rushing yards, certainly outstanding for Ohio State when they can get that run game going. Judkins, 96. Travion Henderson, 54. Will Howard, 42 yards gained. Obviously, his net's not as high because of sacks. What they were able to do to get the goal line stand late in the fourth quarter, Penn State knocking on the door, 4 plays from the 3-yard line and in, and unable, and we'll talk about Penn State's inability to score in the red zone, but unable to score there. And then to take the ball from your own 1-yard line where, Penn State didn't score, but hey, you get a safety, you get the ball back, and who knows what happens.
Right.
You push the quarterback for 4 yards on the first play, and you never give the ball back to Penn. That was a championship drive for Ohio State. And how they did it with their physicality at the line of scrimmage in their run game. Obviously, the defensive stop, but then offensively, that physicality. That, to me, was, there's a couple things that impressed me, but that was really impressive what Ohio State was able to do.
And I think what you just said, I put all the credit first and foremost on Ryan Day. Like, I know he gets a lot of criticism, and I think for the most part unfairly from Ohio State fans, but I think he kind of showed you in this game, because what he did first and foremost was take a glaring weakness, that left side of the offensive line. And coming from the Nebraska game last week where they could not run the ball, we talked about it, they ran as a team for 2.1 yards per carry, and it almost cost them at home against Nebraska, a team that's reeling right now. We'll get to them a little bit later on in the pod as well. And in the span of 5 days, going on the road against one of the best rush defenses in all of the country, to make it to where if you haven't watched Ohio State at any point before Saturday, you would have had zero clue they had offensive line problems. You'd have had no idea they had a left tackle making his debut, at least at that position, sliding over from left guard, and Donovan Jackson. Like you said, Hinsman making his starting debut at left guard. You had two guys playing out of place for the first time in their careers, and you would have no idea. Outside of one or two Abdul Carter pressures on Will Howard, the run game, like you said, was tremendous. 176 yards on the ground. If you take out the sacks, they ran for over 5 yards a carry. And I think you got to give Ryan Day a lot of credit here for having his guys ready to play. I think the mark of a great coach, Trip, is having the talent, but then also with your ability to game plan, scheme, and have you guys ready to go, making that talent better, right? What is it? The thing is what? The sum is greater than the whole of the parts. I think I screwed that up. But you know what I'm saying here, that old phrase of just like, you're able to take what you have and make those guys better based on what you can do as a coach and putting them in positions to succeed. I thought they did that tremendously in this game. And oh, by the way, not only did they pave the way on the ground and win this game primarily on the in the run rushing attack, but also no penalties for the most part, and no costly things, no false starts. Again, guys with inexperience, guys playing out of position, yet they kept their cool and were not rattled and were prepared for a still hostile environment at noon.
Yeah, I think no false starts. The penalties, the crowd was certainly incredibly loud, and we both experienced it. I experienced it on the sideline. You experienced it from the nosebleeds. But I think what I saw, how much did you pay for those?
$200. And we got those, by the way, like 2 months in advance before we kind of saw this top 5 matchup coming. Yeah. And
you were how many rows up?
We were row 76 in the upper deck behind the end zone here. So let's just say we got a great bird's eye view, and some of the planes that were flying nearby, we could have touched the wings.
What was it like when they did the flyover from up there?
I missed it. Sort of missed it. Traffic. We'll say this. Traffic getting into the game was the most horrific thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. We stayed in Bellefonte, which for those who don't know is the town outside of State College. It is no more than 3 miles from where we were going to park the car. We left Dunkin' Donuts at 8 a.m. We had to walk. I left my parents. They were driving the car. We got out of the car and just walked to the stadium because it took 4 hours to get basically 3 miles. So I just got into the stadium, just got out of the bathroom and looked out, and the planes were flying right over. So I saw them. Wow. But not from a cool seat that I was hoping to see. That was one of the cooler parts of the game. Glad I guess I didn't completely miss it. But yeah, thank you for the noon start in the State College traffic here. That was undefeated, to say the least.
When did your parents make it in?
They made it in actually faster than I thought. They got in probably about 5 minutes into the game. But unfortunately for them, missed the flyover, missed the intros, missed Penn State's first possession. I think they may have gotten in just for the pick six. Other than that, yeah, they missed missed the entire tailgate, missed some of the game as well. Again, going 3 miles, about 4 hours. Crazy. Crazy.
That is crazy. It's a good segue though, because I thought you talk about, Day and the X's and O's. I thought the Ohio State mindset of we have something to prove. There's a chip on their shoulder. And I think a lot of it did start not only with their head coach, but their quarterback, Will Howard, his determination, his leadership. And look, he had an early pick six in that game, and he bounced right back. He's going in for what I think really would have changed the complexion. The rushing touchdown where the ball gets knocked out of his hands at the 2, ends up in the end zone as a touchback. That was a play Penn State desperately needed for life in that game. And there's a couple of key swing plays in the game. That's one. The early pick six is one. certainly when Penn State has the opportunity to score going into half, and at the very worst, you figure is going to kick a field goal and make it a 1-point game, but you get set up inside the 5, and the incredible interception along the sideline, in and out of the hands of Harrison Wallace, and Ohio State holds Penn State. And obviously we'll talk about that more, but Penn State inside the red zone, 2 field goals, no offensive touchdowns, but what their defense is able to do. But I think a lot of it comes back to the personality that Ohio State had going into this game. That's something to prove mentality. And it's a 20-13 game. It could have gone, there's no doubt, it could have gone either way. It could have gone either way. There's so many 50-50 calls. And I think a lot of Penn State fans are saying a lot of those 50-50 calls went Ohio State's way in this game. But Ohio State won the football game. And how they did it on the road in that environment with something to prove, kind of backs against the wall mentality. To me, that, along with their physicality, it's not always flashy. Like, Oregon's won a lot of flashy games this year. Texas has won some flashy games this year. Alabama was flashy when they came back to beat Georgia early in the season. This was like a good old-fashioned Big Ten game, and Ohio State made they made a few more big plays, and they came out on top. And now they're in the driver's seat for a rematch with Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, because they will host Indiana on November 23rd. Hoosiers still undefeated. Ohio State controls its own destiny the rest of the way to still accomplish every one of its goals, because they go into Happy Valley and found a way to get it done with that patchwork offensive line that ended up being outstanding in the game.
I like what you said, because it is like we talked a lot about it from Penn State's perspective last week, right? How they were grinding out wins. They were not flashy, but they were mentally tough and resilient and found ways to dig out of some first half holes to come back and have some impressive wins, especially on the road in the second half. And Ohio State just took that and ran with it here in this game. Yeah. So like you look at the beginning of the game where Penn State drives down, solid drive to start the game, field goal. Then 3 plays later, Will Howard throws a pick six. It is 10-0. That place is rocking. A few drives later, like you said, Will Howard fumbles out of the end zone. In the first, 15, 20 minutes of this game, you had Will Howard contribute to 14 points going the wrong way in terms of a pick six and a touchdown coming off the board for the Buckeyes. And you put that on top of what happened the last time they played a big game against Oregon. It's easy to say, here we go again. The same thing happened. It's not our day. And for them to just stay so mentally tough and resilient, I don't think Ryan Day gets enough credit for that. And I think a lot of people point to 3 games, which are the last 3 times they played Michigan, just to generalize his entire career as Ohio State's coach. But that team is mentally tough. They are physically tough. They are mentally tough. And to not only win that game, but win the game in the fashion that they did, digging out of an early hole, having Will Howard not feel bad for himself in a game that he put a lot of pressure on himself. Right? This was his homecoming. He wanted to go to Penn State. He felt disrespected. They never gave him a scholarship. To have that start the way he did and still not be phased, to drive right down after the pick six and score a touchdown, to have some big key plays on the ground with his legs, to convert some short third downs. He was tremendous. Again, that was a just tough victory for Ohio State that we don't really say too often for their program. They have a lot of skill, a lot of flash, but they grinded this out in a way that was, I thought, really impressive.
It's interesting because they termed it a crossroads game for them. And there are points during the game where I think, as you dive into it, that they're at crossroads, right? You talk about the pick six. It's a 10-0 game. Place is going bonkers. Well, they put together their best drive of the game and go down and make it 10-7, and then actually come back and take the lead 14-10 with another outstanding drive that they put together. Was it the first drive? It was that second drive where Penn State, again, small things can add up in a game like this. You have the player, and I don't think it was a good call, the taunting call that extended an Ohio State drive. I don't think it was a good call. I think it was a bad call. I think it was an official inserting himself into a game where you didn't have to there. It wasn't egregious. Let the players decide it. I get it. But it's a point of emphasis. It was called, and Ohio State takes advantage and cashes in for a touchdown on their second opportunity. And then all of a sudden they're up 14-10 when they were at a crossroad. And those little things add up in a game like this. And it really felt like, and especially after it, it feels like two programs that were at the exact same spot, right? Both needed a big win. Probably not going to define their season. What happens the rest of the year will ultimately still define it for Penn State and Ohio State, regardless of what this outcome was. But it did feel like both programs were looking for that breakthrough, whether they needed it or not. Whether, you care about the outside noise and what we're saying on a podcast and what everyone else is saying, your fans on social media. But it had that feeling. And Ohio State found a way to get it done. And, taking it from that Penn State perspective, you come out of it frustrated and you're not in control of your own destiny anymore. But your entire season, because of a 12-team playoff now, is still right there in front of you. So I think the sting of the loss, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever it may be, they have to get over it in Happy Valley because they have a good Washington team coming in Saturday night for a whiteout game. They still have to go on the road to a good Minnesota team that won again this weekend. But if you can get past, hey, it didn't go for us that day, we can't wait to get another shot at it, it doesn't define your season. Just like this win doesn't define Ohio State's season. If the Buckeyes don't beat Indiana or the Buckeyes don't win the Big Ten championship and the Buckeyes don't make a run in the playoffs, that ultimately is still going to define their season. But for early November, for both of these programs, it was Ohio State just on this day that took the step forward. But then for Penn State, leaves you with question marks that maybe you thought might be there, but you weren't sure. And now you have the opportunity. You still have the opportunity to make amends for them, learn from it, and prove what you ultimately think you are moving forward because of a new era of college football.
With this new era, like you said, Penn State still, like, their national title dreams and hopes are still alive, right? They're not eliminated unlike previous years in the playoff where you lose to Ohio State in a 14 format and your season's most likely done. But the frustrating part here, at least for myself, I think a lot of Penn State fans here, Trip, is the fact that it felt like here we go again, and we've seen this same song and dance now for years. And it's hard to believe that even though the dreams are technically still alive and in front of them, it's hard to believe they can actually do it because anytime they play a team that's equally, if not more talented, you see the same issues pop up year after year. And the frustrating thing is you've not seen any change. You're not seeing any improvement to where we're talking about this game specifically, but really you go back to 2019 for Penn State. Every time they played Ohio State, these principles, these struggles have remained the same. Receivers not making any plays at all. Outside of Tyler Warren, there's no receiver that's consistently getting open and making some big explosive plays down the field. That's been the case for Penn State now against Ohio State for years. It's a situation where execution, especially offensively, forget the receivers, entire offense, you didn't score a touchdown. The only touchdown you scored this game was a pick six 5 minutes into it. Other than that, you set up for 2 field goals. You get 0 points in terms of having, 2 goal-to-goal situations here at different points in the game. The offense, yet again, not executing, not scoring points, while the defense did keep you in it, is another theme of right now Penn State when they play Ohio State. The defense, again, played well. I don't want to criticize them too much. You gave up 20 points. I think that's a win when you face an explosive still Ohio State offense. But with that said, 5 minutes ago, chance to still get the ball back. Ohio State in the shadow of their own goal line. They run the ball down your throat to salt away the clock and end the game. You needed one big stop, one more stop. Could not get it. And even with play calling, I don't think Andy Kotelnicki's play calling was that egregiously bad like we've seen in previous years. But there are questions for sure. Play calling is yet again coming up here, and some certain play calls in certain moments is yet another criticism. And Trip, we can say that just about this game, but you look at back at any Penn State Ohio State game really from 2019 on, it's the same things. It is literally the same things each and every year. You talk about it, you analyze it, and you hope that, with different coordinator hires, with different players coming in and out, with different quarterbacks, that things could change. Yet each and every year, we're sitting here saying the same things keep on coming back to bite them every single time. And that's part of the reason why I thought this game was huge for Penn State to finally do it. Again, the loss doesn't end their season. So they had that benefit there compared to Ohio State. You have a second loss. Obviously, you're in a lot bigger trouble, but you still got to prove it. You still got to do it here. And yet again, in the big moment, we're talking about Penn State coming off small with the same issues rearing their ugly heads for what feels like the infinite amount of time.
Yeah, the facts are what they are, and it's an 8-game losing streak to Ohio State. Now, it's the third time over those 8 games that Penn State has had a double-digit lead and has been unable to secure the victory. They're right there, but for whatever reason, and I'm going to take it from a more micro perspective on this game itself, your offense only manages 6 points in the football game, and settling for field goals in big games is often the difference. And you have to give Ohio State's red zone defense has been tremendous the last couple of weeks. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. But when you have opportunities to score, particularly opportunities to score touchdowns, you have to convert touchdowns. And what changes in a game like this is the margin is so slim because you're only going to get so many opportunities. That's why an Ohio State drive extended, whether it's a good call or not, by a ton. You were off the field defensively. You were off the field, and Ohio State takes it and puts it in the end zone for 7 points. The margin is so slim. Every small detail matters in a game like this. So the difference between a field goal attempt and a touchdown is massive. Penn State, 2 yards on 8 plays inside the red zone. You can't have 2 trips inside the 5 and come out with 0 points. You're not going to win a big game. Now, people can say, okay, this is the reason why they didn't. This is why. That's fair for anyone to say. I'm going to leave it at that. You cannot go into the red zone. You cannot go inside the 5-yard line and come out of it with no points. For Penn State to be successful, and this is great that Tyler Warren had 3 carries for 47 yards. And Aller looked healthy and had 10 carries. He gained 45 yards. The sacks brought him back to 31-yard total. Aller, I thought, played really well.
Agreed.
But your top 2 rushers in a game against Ohio State cannot be Tyler Warren and Drew Aller. Allen and Singleton were held to 42 yards on 18 carries. Same thing at the receiver position. You need your best players in big games to be your best players. I thought Carter was. I thought Aller played well. I thought Warren played well. Singleton, 6 catches, 54 yards. Warren, 4 catches, 47 yards. Wallace, 2 for 45, and Fleming, 1 for 4. The receivers, they need contributions from other wide receivers in a game like this. And to your point, you talked about the lack of, since Godwin and Hamilton, Hamler and Dotson, the lack of a guy to create that big play on the outside. I think that was an unknown. There was hope, and Wallace certainly looked at points this year. Fleming made some big catches for them. Clifford made some, but in a game like this, who is it going to be to step up? And that's where that slim margin really comes into play. And look, they control everything moving forward. I think it's a great learning experience for them, but it's all about the margin in this. And every small mistake is amplified. And anytime you have an opportunity, you have to cash in. You have to cash in. And Ohio State made the most of its opportunities. And in this game, Penn State fell short in making the most of its opportunities.
At the end of the day, it feels like just make a play, right? Like you said before, you need your best players to play their best in big games. And for a while, that does not feel like that consistently happens for Penn State. And I think the receiver position, especially now, it always kind of rears its ugly head in this modern day of college football. Look, you got a good quarterback. You need to make some plays in the passing game. And maybe it's not even making the outstanding play, right? Like, we're not sitting here saying you got to be extraordinary. Just make maybe the plays you're supposed to make. And for Trey Wallace, who had a tremendous catch just the play before where he was interfered with to get the ball inside the 10-yard line. And then the next play they throw to him, catch the ball, number 1. Ball's in there, great throw by Drew, catch the ball. Worst case, you got to leave that play right there where it's an incomplete. And instead, you bobble the ball, you allow Igbinosun to make a tremendous play to get the ball, get his foot in bounds. And now all of a sudden, you fail to make a play, or to Ohio State's credit, they just make a big play in a big moment. And now all of a sudden you're looking at bare minimum, like you said, you're down by, you kick a field goal here, you're down by 14-13 at halftime. Now all of a sudden it's 14-10. Ohio State gets the ball to start the second half, and all momentum is gone. Just make a play. And to speak on the receivers here, Tyler Donahue did a tremendous deep dive on this for Penn State receivers and their struggles this season. Through 5 Big Ten games so far for Penn State, their wide receivers have 0 touchdown receptions. 0. They don't have one. Liam Clifford had 107 yards against UCLA. Other than that, no wide receiver for Penn State in a Big Ten game has surpassed 70 yards. In this game against Ohio State, Penn State receivers combined for 3 catches, 49 yards. Again, when you're not running the ball at all, forget about running the ball well. When you can't run the ball 3 times from the 3-yard line to punch it in for 6, you need somebody else to step up. And we're seeing here for Penn State receivers, it's been a common theme in the last few years. They can't make any plays in these big games.
And Ohio State, what it allowed Downs to do defensively then is to play up in the box, and I thought he was outstanding for them.
He was.
What he can do in the run game, he's such a great athlete. He was a difference maker because he didn't need Ohio State, and those corners are physical. I mean, they are physical. And if you're Penn State, you certainly have, and I thought from my perspective, the officials called it the same both ways, where they allowed both teams to be physical and handsy on the outside. And I think Penn State had a case on several plays of early contact or holding that was not called. But it was called the same for both teams in a game like that. And ultimately, them calling the game that way makes it that much more difficult on those wide receivers. And whether it's called that way or it's not, you have to be able to overcome that element of the game. And for whatever reason, this day went to Ohio State. And I think you can point to all the different reasons in the game. We've kind of broke down the game. This is the day it went to Ohio State. We talked about Ohio State perspective, and this for them, okay, it feels like it leapfrogs you right back into that national title contention. And it's so crazy, right? One offensive pass interference call goes their way against Oregon instead of against them, and they're the undefeated team. There's not even talk about Ohio State having any hiccups. It's crazy how, and again, that's that slim margin, and it's a perception. Ultimately, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and throw Indiana in the mix, 4 outstanding teams, all ranked in the top 10 and in great shape to make the college football playoffs. Now, as fans, as analysts, as talk show or podcast hosts, yeah, you want to break the game down. And are there some big picture implications out of this? Sure. Like you talked about, at some point as a Penn State fan, player, coach, those who support the program, they need to see their program. They want to see their program break through. It's a shame for them it didn't happen on this day. But if they take care of business against Washington, on the road at Purdue, on the road at Minnesota, and at home against Maryland, all games they will be favored in, should be favored in, they're in the playoffs with a home playoff game, and they'll have a second chance to right their wrongs, as James Franklin said after the game. And that's the beauty of this. And, the 111,030 people that were there on Saturday, as much as it stings for them, they'll probably all be back, all wearing white, when they're at home hosting Notre Dame or Alabama or Ole Miss or Boise State or Tennessee in the playoff game. Then the stakes will rise again.
And that's a last thing I want to mention about this game before we get into others here, is your perspective on that. Because like you said, this game is different in the sense of Penn State's season is not over, and there's still a lot in front of them here. Whether it's during the game, on the sideline, after the game, like what was your perspective of the team's mood here? Because it is weird where you're conditioned. This game probably defines your season. And now, again, like you said before, and I think you're right, like there's still everything there in front of them despite this loss. They dropped to number 6 in the AP poll. Like they're still in line if you take care of business for a home playoff game, which puts you in a great position here to advance and win at least one playoff game and chase what you want. What was the mood vibe like kind of around the team after the game?
Disappointment and frustration. Like if you were in Happy Valley, I know you were, but like Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning, the energy, the excitement, I think the belief, I think not only did the team believe, the confidence, the swagger, the fans had it. And I think everyone thought Saturday was going to be their crowning moment, which I think makes this Saturday's game for Penn State against Washington, a whiteout at 8:00 on Peacock, I think that's what makes bouncing back that much more difficult, but imperative, because that belief, I think it was as excited and as optimistic as Penn State fans and the program and the players had been. Like, they felt like the window was there, the door was open to beat Ohio State. And I think that's what makes it frustrating and disappointed. That's where you have to now be a mentally tough football team and understand that the game has changed. And I know that's what James Franklin's messaging is going to be after the game and moving forward. The game has changed. You know, you can tweet and talk that you want another shot at these guys. In the past, you don't get it. Now you actually could get it. You could very reasonably have another opportunity to play and beat them, or any of these other teams that you're trying to compare yourself to. That there is no doubt they were mad, angry, frustrated, whatever word you want to use. I think the whole town was that way. Like, I know you went downtown after people weren't happy. Like, they were sad, and what was going to be a crowning moment. And I think everyone was like hoping that they're going to be carrying the goalposts up College Avenue after that game. It didn't happen. Okay. But this time, as much as it stings, as much as it hurts, and you know, the questions are out there and the record is out there of against top, you're still going to get another opportunity if you take care of business. And that's what the mindset has to be moving forward.
Speaking of taking care of business, right? Ohio State, to their credit, did on Saturday. Another team that did, to shock and nobody, Indiana. They moved to 9-0. Well, I will say we did get this right, Trip, on the preview pod here on Thursday. We said this could be the game where they do trail for the first time this season. They trailed immediately 10-0 to Michigan State, and then coolly rattled off 47 straight points to hammer the Spartans. They are 9-0 on the season now.
Crazy.
They finally cracked the AP top 10. Indiana, man, they just continue to roll, continue to impress, and Trip continue to leave no doubt whatsoever.
Yeah, when they're scoring 40-plus points a game and how dominant they've been. Curtis Rourke comes back at quarterback in this game, goes 19 for 29, throws 4 touchdown passes. The running game never really got on track, but this isn't, as I've said all year long, it's not just about the Indiana offense. Their defense, 7 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. We've talked about Mikhail Kamara a couple of times, 2.5 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss. Childs threw 2 more picks, which has been his kryptonite this season. And this is as well-rounded, balanced, and as exceptional a football team as there is right now nationally. And yeah, they finally get some respect and jump to number 8 in the AP poll. They're playing like a top 5 team. They just haven't had the schedule to prove it to this point. But all they can do is to continue to dominate teams in front of them. And I don't know if Kurt Cignetti listens to the pod, but after the game, he's like, well, now that we've trailed, he tweeted, we've trailed, and I guess we could come back from that too. You know, he's not shy, and they embody that personality. To me, they are for real. They are legitimate, and they've got everything going for them right now. And it is quite the story for how dominant they've been. Like, look at this past Saturday. We mentioned that 7 AP top 25 teams lost. And you obviously had Penn State going down to a top 5 team. Pitt in a top 20 matchup lost against SMU. Minnesota was favored on the road and beat Illinois. But South Carolina, 44-20 over Texas A&M. Iowa State fell to Texas Tech, 23-22. Clemson, 33-21, lost to Louisville. Kansas State lost to Houston, 24-19. Tennessee was pushed again. Georgia was pushed again. Indiana, Ohio State was pushed by Nebraska last weekend. In the beginning of the year, Oregon, and they are a different team now, but they were pushed by Idaho and Boise State. Indiana hasn't been tested. That's how good they've been. And in this era, with the parity I think you have this year, no matter who's been on their schedule, to have been as dominant as they have been every single week. They are as good as anybody right now.
They are. I totally agree. And you look now at that game 3 weeks from now in Columbus. I mean, could be game of the year. Like, this is with how well they're playing it. And it's unbelievable. We've spent the first 30 minutes talking about Penn State, Ohio State. Why was that Ohio State win so big? Because all of a sudden you could be sitting at 2 losses and then have that team come into your town. Like, that's a huge win
for Ohio State for that reason alone.
We've been talking, Trip, about the Indiana disrespect when it comes to the AP poll. And for, the AP poll now with the College Football Playoff Committee is irrelevant once this week starts. November 5th, on Tuesday, we'll get the first iteration of the College Football Playoff rankings. Right now, you have 4 Big Ten teams, Oregon at 1, Ohio State 3, Penn State 6, Indiana 8. 4 Big Ten teams in the top 10, by the way, most of any conference. Take that, SEC. Do you expect that, maybe not the exact number, but do you expect by the time the rankings come out on Tuesday evening to see 4 Big Ten teams in the top 10?
Yeah, absolutely. All 4 deserve it. Penn State's only loss was at home against a team that's going to be number 2 or number 3 in the country. Ohio State's only loss was on the road against a team that certainly looks like the number 1 team in the country. Indiana's been dominant. And I think you're shaping up for the Big Ten to have 3 teams. You'll have the bye, and then I think 2 other Big Ten teams hosting home playoff games. I think you have 4 teams in the playoff, and you're now setting up to have a bye and 2 of those 4 hosting home. So 3 teams finishing in the top 8 of the playoff rankings, just the way the season's gone. It is outstanding right now for the Big Ten. I think the SEC ultimately, because of the help I think they got this weekend, is going to get 4 teams in. But I think more of those teams, you're going to have Texas and Georgia are going to be in. But then the other 2 teams are going to have to go on the road, probably to Big Ten schools in that opening round. Big Ten schools or Notre Dame. Like, they're going to have to leave the South. And that positions the Big Ten moving forward really well going into the playoff here as we reach this first week of November.
Agreed. And that's why I hope, they've talked about the format here for the next 2 years being the same. And then from there, it could change. I hope this stays the same because I think this format's tremendous where you get home, like you reward teams for winning some big games here. You get a home playoff game on campus. Like you said, like having Alabama leave the South to go maybe to Bloomington or Columbus, like that's a massive challenge. Like it's crazy. It's a massive challenge. Same for A&M or LSU. Or like that is going to be really tough now, I think, for the SEC to push their way to get, 2 or 3 teams in the Final Four or get 2 teams scoring off in the national title game because you're going to have to go on the road to some tough places. And now you're looking at Indiana. They are playing like one of the best teams in the country. Good luck. Good luck going to Bloomington. And that place is going to be on fire. You talk about them hosting a playoff game against, if they're a 7 seed against a 10th team in the country, good luck. Like that's a game where Indiana could be favored and has a great chance to win here because I'm with you to go back to what we talked about before. This team is well-rounded. They have an insane offense, but their defense, kind of like Oregon, has continued to get better each and every week. It's under the radar because offense now sells, right? That's a sexy object we all kind of look at. And it's fun, and they're putting 40 points up on the board every week. Their defense, though, is really damn good. Really damn good. And they're one of the most well-rounded, dominant teams in all of college football, continue to leave no doubt. It's a shame it took now, I guess, 11 weeks, right? Now this is the poll going to week 11. 11 weeks for them to be ranked in the top 10. Way too long for that. They finally jumped up 5 spots. But I think they'll get rewarded here by the College Football Playoff Committee because, again, this first rankings takes everything into account. They're going to get, they haven't gotten, I think, a lot of respect. They're going to get it now, I think, starting Tuesday night.
And I think their defense is good at all 3 levels. They have good linebackers. Fisher's their top linebacker. Farrell had 2 picks against Chuck. He had both of the interceptions. Obviously, we've talked about what they have up front. I think it's different guys every week making kind of big plays for them on defense too. They've had that offensively, but they're getting that on defense. If you can continue, I guess the question if it's not Indiana and you do blind resume, those scores, the numbers they're putting up, and slap Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, they're the number 1 team in the country. But because of, being Indiana, the belief still isn't there. And until you can prove it, and they'll have that chance on November 23rd, they still are always going to be in that spot of, well, really? And I guess we'll find out, right? Guess we'll find out sooner rather than later at this point. But every test, how are they going to fare when they take on Nebraska? How are they going to fare when they take on Washington? What are they going to do when they've trailed? They haven't passed. They've aced every test so far.
And it's hard. Like I can't right now sit here and envision them not playing competitively against Ohio State in a few weeks. Again, they've done to every single inferior opponent what they should have done. There's no reason to think right now they're going to go into Columbus and leave losing 35-14. Like that could be a game where I think they absolutely have a chance to win it. And that's going to be like the only unfair part, I guess, for Indiana this year is because of the schedule. This is the one game where I think everybody's going to look at and watch and probably unfairly judge one way or another, maybe give them more credit than they deserve for this game. Or on the other side, if they lose it, maybe criticize them, oh, they blew out everybody, but they played no one. Now they played a real team and lost. Like they're not. That's the only concern for Indiana. But right now, like you said, there's no reason to doubt them. There's no reason to believe that this one big game in a few weeks they can't be competitive against. Look, it's going to be a fun atmosphere this week with Michigan. No, Michigan's not coming in strong whatsoever. But at least in terms of a big brand, CBS 3:30 Eastern window here, a lot of eyeballs, I think, on Indiana this week. Be a really good test here for them.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Ohio State, you mentioned it could kind of go either way. I think, obviously they beat them. They're for real, whatever. I think no matter what happens, even if they would lose that game, and it's still a ways away, we'll even learn more this week, like you talked about with Michigan. I think it's unfair to judge them if things don't go well in that game and be overly, oh, they're frauds. That's the big thing this year is that's a fraud. They're a fraud. They're a fraud. You can't. They've earned my respect. They have, and if they take care of business in every other game, no matter what happens in Columbus, they're a top 10 team. They're legit, and I think that's unfair to them.
Well put. That's what I was trying to say. You said it in a more succinct fashion. That's my one concern because, people I think are noticing, but I don't think many people are watching that game. People watch, and I'm with you. I'm afraid, and you may think, "Oh, no. Trust me, it's going to happen." People are going to watch that game, and if you see Ohio State outclass Indiana, even if it's a 14-point victory here, there will be, I think, unfair judgments on the season, and there will be people, maybe not a lot, there will be people here, and hopefully not on the committee, that will try to invalidate everything you've seen up to this point because of one game. That is the concern for Indiana. But again, right now, they've given you no reason to believe that a 14, 20, 24-point loss is coming to Ohio State because they right now are taking care of business and playing really, really good football. You mentioned Michigan before. Yeah,
I was about to say the exact same thing. How about that? We're good.
How about Oregon, Trip? Continues to roll. Like you said before that they look like the number one team in the country. I mean, they each week get better. And just like Indiana now, continue to leave. No doubt. They drub Michigan in the big house and just come out, even with the Tez Johnson injury, which we'll get here in a second. They still just completely bludgeon right now Michigan and left zero doubt walking out of the big house who the number one team in the country is.
Yeah, real quick thought on Oregon. I think they're crushing it. And Trayshawn Holden steps up, 6 catches, 149. So they have 3 legit receivers. Jordan James ran the ball again extremely well, 117 yards on 23 carries. They've got everything going offensively. Michigan, on the flip side, coaching decisions questionable in that game. Rotating quarterbacks, serious concern. Injuries on defense, serious concern. It's starting to spiral the wrong way right now for Michigan. It really is. But the Ducks are for real. And let me throw a stat at you here. This is just how impressive Dylan Gabriel has been in his collegiate career. 177 career touchdowns. He's one away from tying Case Keenum for the most career touchdowns at the FBS level. And he now has 26 games in which he's had a passing and rushing touchdown. And that ties him with Jalen Hurts. Fly Eagles fly. Big win yesterday. But that ties him with Jalen Hurts for the FBS all-time lead as well. It's pretty impressive company.
That is. Now, he's obviously had a little bit more time at the college level compared to Hurts and Keenum, which benefits him. But he's consistency. He's Mr. Consistent, where as long as he's healthy, he's producing. He's making some great throws. That touchdown he had, the 30-yard run just right up the middle was incredible, showing off his athleticism. There's not a bad word right now you could say about Dylan Gabriel. I am interested in you brought up Trayshawn Holden, which I think is a really positive sign for the Ducks because it does not look pretty right now in terms of Tez Johnson's health. We're recording this on Monday morning. We've not gotten any official update yet from Oregon, but it's not great when Tez Johnson himself posts on Instagram a picture of heartbreaking with a black and white photo of him lying on the ground. It looked to be a shoulder or collarbone injury. That's what they were talking about on CBS. I mean, you kind of see the way he was tackled, landed right on that right shoulder. Does not look promising for his future and could be possibly, again, we don't know officially, but possibly a season-ending injury. obviously it's brutal. Johnson
Yeah.
is such a dynamic talent. Him and Stewart are 1-1A. They're one of the best wide receiver duos in college football this year. I think the encouraging part for the Ducks and why you still could believe you could win a national title is he goes down and immediately Trayshawn Holden comes in, has a big game, makes some explosive plays. Like they have depth. And we talk about it, what does it take to win a national title? Part of that is depth. Guys are going to get hurt. You are going to lose guys in the sport of football here. And next man up, can you have the requisite depth and guys ready to play? We saw Ohio State do that with their offensive line on Saturday in Happy Valley. And for this game on the road in Michigan, you saw Oregon's wide receiver depth, I think, really shine here as well, where you're never going to replace Johnson, right? He's way too good, and there's too much respect for his play to just say, Holden could just fill his role, no problem. But it is encouraging to see immediately Holden step up, make some big plays, tough catches here, and try to best he can fill that massive void now that could be left by Johnson's injury for maybe the rest of the year.
And another impressive win this weekend, Minnesota winning again. Now 6-3 on the year, not ranked this week. I don't even think they got votes this week, but they have wins over USC. Yeah, it's crazy. They have wins over USC and Illinois, 2 ranked wins. And what was their problem week number 1? They couldn't close it out in the fourth quarter. There's no better fourth quarter football team right now in the Big Ten than the Minnesota Golden Gophers. In a game they were up, Illinois then took the lead, and they had to find a way to get it done at the end, and it's their 4th straight win. Darius Taylor, one of the great backs in a loaded Big Ten conference of running backs, they found a way. And the problem for Illinois in their losses has been turnovers from Luke Altmaier, and he lost 2 fumbles in this game. That has been the recurring theme for Illinois in their defeats this year, is that when their quarterback takes care of the football, they are able to win tight, low-scoring games. When he doesn't, it leaves them susceptible to coming out on the wrong end of football games. But Minnesota, they look good. Brosmer played extremely well again for them on the offensive side. They've been stingy on defense this year. And they now, all of a sudden, not only are sitting at bowl eligibility, they're in position here to make a good run. And I think, as we've talked about, they're probably the team outside of Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State. They're the 5th best team in the Big Ten. And I think they've kind of left no doubt that they are at this point.
I'm with you 1,000,000%. Now, like you said, you're at right now 6-3. You look at their final 3 games at Rutgers. You welcome Penn State to town after a bye, by the way. Then you finish on the road at Wisconsin. And there's a real path here for 8-4. We talked about that Penn State game. I mean, I'll say it myself, I'm nervous about that game. Minnesota's playing really well at home. Like that, we could be talking about an 8-4 Minnesota team, maybe 9-3 with 3 ranked wins, 2 at the time over top 11 opponents. This is like Indiana's obviously going to take the cake in terms of biggest surprise and most impressive team in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah.
Minnesota, though, is not that far behind. With where they are picked in the preseason poll we talked about on Thursday, I think it was 13 off the top of my head here. So towards the bottom half of Minnesota, we talked about, I mean, I was down on them beginning of the year. I said, oh, they can win like 4 or 5 games. Maybe this would be a nice season for them.
I think PJ Fleck,
the path right.
PJ Fleck was feeling some heat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, again, with how that season started, like we said, with the loss to North Carolina, you get drubbed in the second half by Iowa at home. You're sitting there 2-2 kind of saying, what the hell are we? And they have, it's not going to, he's not, again, because of what Indiana has done, they're not going to get the recognition in terms of surprise team of the year or even coach of the year. But in terms of just like one of the more impressive teams and like solid teams in the Big Ten, Minnesota's right there, man. They've had a great season. And it's been fun to watch. They have won in different ways. They've found ways to win on the road and at home. They've beaten big time opponents. Like they're rounding right now into November, playing their best football.
Yeah, talk about their turnaround. And then the turnaround for UCLA as well, beating Nebraska on the road. And Nebraska now, went from the hot story, and I still think they're on the right trajectory long term. But Dylan Raiola left the game in the fourth quarter with an injury, and they're in danger of missing a bowl game. Will they get, you have it on the screen, is Nebraska in serious danger of missing out on bowl eligibility? Will they get the win they need at USC against Wisconsin? Nebraska at USC, winner goes to a bowl game, losers home for Christmas. That honestly might be the case.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, now with how Wisconsin is playing that game, the only game you have left at home seems like, I think of the 3 games, like you just said, with 2 of them on the road, that seems like the best game. The best game for you
Yep.
to win is their last home game against Nebraska, the Saturday before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think they're going to make a bowl game. I think they will break through here. They were 5-1. Now you're sitting here at 5-4. But you look back at last year, right, with Matt Rule, how they started. They had 5 wins and finished the season losing at Michigan State, lost at home to Maryland, lost at Wisconsin, then lost to Iowa. They had 5 wins and finished with 5 wins. Lost 4 games in a row, and now you're seeing right now 3 games in a row. And now the good news for them is you have to lose 6 in a row to not maintain or get bowl eligibility. I think they will win a game here. But man, like you said, like the hot start they got off to, the buying around the program, again, I definitely got over my skis with them and put expectations too high after the hot start. And you look at their schedule, at least what we thought it was going to look like in the beginning of the year, right? Against Illinois, against Indiana, those teams way more difficult than they appeared to be, let's say, in July and August. But now it's like, it is a little frustrating. We're starting to see the second year in a row from Matt Rule, a second half slide where you really hope with, again, still some young players in Raiola, who, by the way, made some nice throws in this game before he got hurt. Thought he made some pro level throws. You had some receivers making some big time plays as well, making some tough contested catches. So there was some bright spots in the passing game, which I think is what you want to see, right? When your future is based around Raiola. But again, you're not seeing the consistency. I know he's a true freshman, but I think you still want to see a little bit more consistency at this point now in November compared to what you've seen where, yeah, credit UCLA. Great win, and they've really kind of, this second half of the season, turned their program around, and they've become very competitive. Really start with that game at Penn State, which I thought they played tough in. The score may not indicate that, but I thought they held their own for the most part. But since that game, they've been tough, won some impressive games on the road now, and they have really done a good job. Credit to Sean Foster, where you look at Nebraska, they've gone the other way.
Who's the better Los Angeles team? Should we end with USC? I mean, credit Washington. Yes. I think Jonah Coleman, good power back. Eli Rogers having a nice season at quarterback. It's a good defense for Jed Fish. But USC, the big story here is USC falls to 4-5. They have to win 2 of their final 3 for bowl eligibility. And Lincoln Riley, you look at social media after the game, Lendale White was probably the most vocal of the notable USC alumni criticizing Riley. But a game USC again led in the fourth quarter. They had an opportunity to win at the end of the fourth quarter, and Miller Moss was unable to complete the drive. And another one that they still haven't won on the road. Where is USC after this loss, 26-21 to the Huskies Saturday?
They're in a spot where, honestly, like we talked about it earlier this year in the podcast. Like, I think if you're USC now, the buyout is very high for Lincoln Riley, so that may be a non-starter here. But I think you have to have a real conversation of, is this program going the way we envisioned under Lincoln Riley? Because right now, you can't say that answer is yes. And I also don't think, Tripp, going forward, you can believe that even though this is a down year, that things are going to get better. Because just look at this season, for example, right? Last year with 7-5 was with Caleb Williams. They had a lot of defensive issues, but that was unacceptable. For the number 1 overall pick, one of the best players in college football, to go 7-5 with where USC thought they would be for that year, massive disappointment. But now you come into this season, you beat LSU to start the year, and every single loss has literally followed the same script. We've talked about Penn State and James Franklin having the same issues against Ohio State pop up year after year. You're seeing this season, the same issues pop up from week to week. There's no improvement. And I do think like there is a correlation when you hear Lincoln Riley talk after the game, and pick any game, pick any loss. It's the same thing. All he keeps harping about is one play here, one play there. If we get 3 plays, all of a sudden we're undefeated. Sure, but why aren't you then making those plays? How come in 5 games you lost, if it comes down to 1 play every game, why are you 0 for 5 in those categories? How come one time you could not make a play where you have a lead in the fourth quarter, either get a stop defensively or most times with the ball in your hand, a chance to win the game? Why are you coming up short? Why aren't you, as a quarterback guru here, dialing up a play or a game plan to where Miller Moss does not have the game on his shoulders and throwing an interception to lose the game or not getting the job done? It's the same script. And again, Tripp, like you look at the future of the program, where's the bright spot? Where are things turning around? Where is any reason to believe that a USC team that will probably go 5-7, coming off a disastrous 7-5 year last year, where's there any belief that anything is turning around anytime soon?
If you really dive into this game too, Miller Moss threw 50 passes for the third time in the last 7 games. Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner, you can talk about Allen and Singleton and Henderson and Judkins, and you can go up and down, Edwards and Mullins at Michigan. They may have the best. They have one of the best. They may have the best running back tandem in the Big Ten. Marks, 878 yards, 9 touchdowns, almost 6 yards per carry, and 37 catches, 260 yards and 7 yards per catch. Why, in a driving rainstorm, why are you not running the ball more in this game? Why? Like, it's not just big picture, like, what's the direct, why can't they pull it off? At what point do you move on? You have a quarterback, a dual threat quarterback from UNLV, Jordan Mayava, who has had success. Like, what point do you move on from Miller Mott? Why is Lincoln Riley repeating the same formula week in and week out of not running the ball and continuing to ride? Miller Moss sometimes looks like an NFL pro out there with the throws he can make. But there are other times he continues to make big mistakes for them. He's thrown a critical pick in all of their losses. So why is Lincoln Riley, what the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting the results to change? Why this year have they not utilized what is the most successful tools for them, or try the other tools at your disposal? To me, that's the big question this year. And I told you, this is a program with high expectations. I told you that, right? One of the first podcasts we did, I said, who's the coach that has the most at stake this year? It's Lincoln Riley.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. And to your point, like, this is what I don't understand. For a while when he was at Oklahoma, they always talked about Oklahoma's offense, right? He got credit for Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts.
And rightfully so.
Right, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. But where did those offenses always start? They started with the run game. I feel like every announcer, every time they talk to Oklahoma, would always talk about physicality in the run game first, opened up the pass game for the receivers and the quarterback. And you'd always see Oklahoma at or near the top in terms of rushing yards per game in all the country. And now, why they are not feeding Woody Marks more than they are is beyond me. Look at this game. Weather, a factor at Washington. By the way, Tripp, you're running the ball well. Woody Marks had 123 yards on just 22 carries. He averaged almost 6 yards per carry. USC as a team averaged over 5 yards per carry. But to your point, USC ran the ball 29 times, attempted 50 passes. He has flipped.
And they were playing with the lead.
The
most running plays USC called was the fourth quarter. The quarter in which they fell behind.
It doesn't make sense. And it's the same story each and every week. You know what? Here's a comp, and this will hit home for you. And I think we have a lot of Eagles fans listening. I think it'll hit home for them as well. It feels like Lincoln Riley coaches like Nick Sirianni, where this is what I mean by that. It's not just good enough that they win. Like, they have to win in a certain style. And it feels like Lincoln Riley, like, I'm going to take Miller Moss, I'm going to make him a first-round pick, and we're just going to throw the ball so much to make me look smart. Like, you look back at the Eagles game against the Jaguars on Sunday. Why are you going for 2? Like it felt like to me with Doug Peterson maybe on the other sideline that Nick Sirianni not only wanted to win that game, but really rub some dirt in it, really kind of show off and add some style points instead of just taking the points, not giving the Jaguars any sort of hope. And I think you look at, going for it on 4th down and field goal territory, bypassing 3 points, going for it 3 times to go for 2 here and not getting 1 time. Like, you left points on the board where a closer game, Eagles won no harm, no foul. But a 5-point game could have been a 10-point game if you just coached the right way. The same thing now feels like for Lincoln Riley, where he's like, we're not only going to win, but we're going to win, showing off. I'm going to try to look like a genius here. And you're seeing now that style lose you games. Like, they are now, forget about the Eagles winning. They are now losing games where they are not going to make a bowl game, in parts because I think Lincoln Riley's ego wants to not only win games, but win games in a certain way. And that is directly impacting USC's ability to win, where they are shuttering a successful part of their team in the run game to win in a certain style that right now is leading to their downfall every single week. It's mind-blowing.
Well, any good coach, any good program, pro, college, high school, I don't care. You have to Number one, your program has an identity. So USC's has become, we're going to throw the football. The Philadelphia Eagles, to use that example further, they're an aggressive franchise. And it started with Doug Peterson on fourth downs, and that is why they won the Super Bowl. It's a big reason why Philadelphia went to the Super Bowl and had a lead on Kansas City 2 years ago, because that's a part of who they are. But you also have to be able to adapt who you are. And, when the brotherly shove and tush push is converting at 92%, okay. When it's converting at 85%, it's a little bit different. When it's 0 for 2 in the game against Jacksonville, instead of trying razzle dazzle out of the tush push, why don't you just kick the field goal to go up 10 points? For Lincoln Riley, when you're running the football, you have to be willing to adjust and adapt as a coach. You can have an identity to your program. You can have goals of what you want your program to be and how you get there. But you have to be able to adjust and adapt to what you are. When Penn State is at the goal line and Tyler Warren is your leading rusher and leading receiver, number 44 has to get a touch. So no matter what you think you are, and no matter how successful you believe you can be, you have to be willing to adjust and adapt. And that's what all the great winning programs will do.
Go back to Michigan last year against Penn State. I'm sure Sharon Moore did not go into that game thinking we're going to run the ball 32 straight times. But because of Penn State's ability to get after the quarterback, because of how well the run game is going, how the game played out, Sharon Moore just kept calling pass plays because he said, you know what, right now this is working. Screw the game plan we had coming into the game. We're going to adjust and, fix our game plan to right now what the in-game strategy is saying. Part of the reason why Michigan went on to win a national title. I'm with you. Like, you can have an idea before the game, we're going to win in this style. But guess what? The game does not play out the way you think it will every time. Sometimes things change. Sometimes an area you thought you could have success in fails, and vice versa. You thought, oh, this could be tough. All of a sudden, you know what? This is actually a strength. We're playing well, better than I thought. Let's keep riding this out. The great coaches, like you said, not only have a great game plan going in, but are not afraid to ditch that game plan when they see what's playing out in front of them. I think for Lincoln Riley, it seems like he has a game plan in his mind on Monday for how Saturday is going to play out, and refuses to change it. Refuses. And it's right now leading, like you said, USC to this down season. It's leading to legendary players going on profanity-laced Twitter rants.
The one where he said we got Ryan Leaf, we got Ryan Leaf, but we really wanted Peyton Manning. That one.
I did not see that one. That was great. I love the Lane Kiffin leave him on the tarmac after the Maryland loss a few weeks ago. Lendell's been funny on social media, that's for sure. But like, you just look, it's a really right now rough time. And if you're USC right now, you have to do some real soul searching. And you know what? Look, the last thing I'm going to say is, right, some of these buyouts are insane. But look at Texas A&M. They were going nowhere with Jimbo Fisher. Now, to their credit, the oil money runs deep, so they were able to do it. But you move on from a guy that you truly felt you just could not win with and the future is not bright with. And now you bring in a guy in Mike Elko, and you're now a win or two away from maybe making the college football playoff at a time otherwise where you had no chance under Jimbo Fisher. Think if you were at USC, like, look, it's an expensive buyout. And it may not, it may be a tough conversation for some boosters here. Mm-hmm. But if you truly feel your program is not going the direction that you thought it would be, and right now there's no reason to think that, biting the bullet ASAP could choose to, or could lend itself, I should say, to making the future brighter than it is right now.
And if you're Ohio State and you lost to Oregon by 1, or you haven't gotten over the hurdle against Michigan, and immediately it's fire day, or the fire Franklin from the Penn State people, like, you're in a really good spot. USC would kill to be in one of those spots right now. And for all these people in social media, and I get, like, you're frustrated after a loss and you want your team to win it, and the expectation is to compete to win national championships at all of those schools that we mentioned. Remember when people wanted Harbaugh out at Michigan, and look what they did. And like, you have to be patient. If you're there, if you're in contention, eventually you feel like you're gonna. I'd rather have a coach and a program that is playing in big games because they're in position to play big games than be where USC is right now, than be where Nebraska has been. So if you're coach and you're your school is playing in top 10, top 5 games, you're there. It can sting to not get the win and to get over the hump. But you ultimately won't be judged until the playoffs. As long as you're there and you have a chance, relax.
All right, Aaron
Because it
Rodgers.
could be, the grass isn't always greener.
You didn't want to spell that out for us?
RELAX. No, I did enough spelling yesterday. EA. What did you do when you were in state college back at your old stomping grounds? We have some Penn Staters that listen to the podcast. Where'd you go?
We bounced around some old haunts. We were able to make it into champs early before it got packed.
Used to be a Chili's back in the day.
Oh, I love that place. And my senior year was the first year champs turned around. It was just a warehouse with all TVs and really no reason to go there. And now it's just, the place to be for Penn State. Had a dirty Sprite, delicious as always how I suggest. And then Saturday,
that was the signature drink. One of my friends at their wedding had the dirty Sprite as the signature drink.
Really?
Yeah, nice. 2 springs ago. And of course, have them tag champs in it. And the next day on Instagram, I look and there's 34-year-old Brian Tripp at a wedding on the champs Instagram. So I was so thrilled to have made that. Instagram
so now I
story.
see why you couldn't come meet me, because you would have been mobbed as a champs celebrity to where you couldn't even probably sit with us, because so many people would be there asking for your autograph, take a picture.
I don't have. There's these like black cards that people can get to skip the line and skip cover and go right in. I do not have one of them. Nor at 35 years old and pushing the 36th birthday coming up, do I feel like that's appropriate, or what I actually want. To meet you, maybe, but not what I actually want.
Yeah, I will say you're not wrong. Yeah, there's some questions there. If you're going, I got the card, fellas. Not wrong.
Look out. Boys are rolling deep. We're old enough.
Tripp's got the squad. Clear out some of the tables. Tripp's coming through.
Old enough to be your parents.
Maybe the next time the Jonas Brothers are there in town, they'll have you on stage.
Funny story, and we'll wrap it up with this. But I was with 2 friends there last year, and we're standing there or having a drink. It's after a game. Like, look, you're in state college trying to have a good time, and my friends were bundled up because we were out in the cold all day, and someone came up to, and I obviously won't say any names here, but if they were listening, they know exactly who they are. Comes up to my friend's wife and goes, and she looks great for her. Like, I don't know how someone would, maybe it was what she was wearing, maybe it was the level of inebriation, but goes, and this is when we knew it was time to go home. I wish my parents were as cool as you.
Damn.
I'll see myself out.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Nice seeing you. Yeah. Well, let's say we left right around the right time. We left at like 7:00. That's probably around the right time when the older folks will say the 30 plus see the exit. And you allow the 20-somethings to have some time. I am 30 on the dot.
Yeah. Used to be an intern for me at the Keystone Sports Beat in the WHVL studios, which you said you drove by this weekend. That was a real treat and probably a flashback down memory lane. Yourself, me, Cody Enos, Matt Mayer, Dan Bazilla, like the whole crew.
Good time. That was the first time I drove by the studio since the last show we did together was that was my senior year, I think. So like 2015, 2016, almost a decade.
And the great thing,
studio looks the same.
I'm sure it does. And the great thing was it was an unpaid internship, but you were also getting paid the same amount I was, which is why the show didn't last. When the paycheck, hey, I haven't gotten paid for 3 months for hosting the show. What's going on? Oh, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, you kind of owe me money. And then all of a sudden, that was that.
You want to get into sports, kids. This is the dirty truth.
It is a good time.
So that is, I think, the perfect place to wrap up our podcast.
Thanks for tuning in again to the Still Enrolled podcast, which you can catch wherever you do prefer to listen to your audio podcasts. You can get it on Spotify, Apple, wherever. Odyssey, obviously a contributing partner, and we thank them for being a part of this. Also, you can go to our YouTube page where you can see us. And the last leg of the Eras Tour took place in Indianapolis in the United States last night. There's only 2 more stops, Toronto and Vancouver, BC. The Eras Tour was back in Miami, New Orleans, and Indianapolis, and Taylor is no longer, there are no more U.S. shows left, no more U.S. dates on the Eras Tour. So that's why I had the sweatshirt on today.
Thank God we got your weekly Taylor Swift Eras Tour update, because I would be very, very panicked that the audience would be missing out on that. So that's what they really tuned in for. So thank you for that.
Yep. Sold my tickets to Indianapolis and paid for my entire trip tickets, lodging to London to go see it.
She's running some business. That is insane. The following is strong, to say the least. Holy cow. Holy cow. Well, good luck to Taylor and her final 2 legs here in Canada. And good luck to you for dealing with us here for the last hour and 10 minutes or so. We'll be back on Thursday. Get you set for a big week 11 right here on the Still Enrolled podcast.